Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our second webinar of our series. This is the series When Hospitality and Belonging Becomes Hard. Faith Community Strategies for Responding to Adults with Varying Needs. And this is, again, the second session in our 4-part webinar series. And we explore the challenging aspects of hospitality of people with disabilities in the life of communities of faith. If you missed our first session, no problem. It is available on our website and you can catch up. You'll notice the link that you might have clicked to register. If you use the website link, it will change and it'll direct you actually to the recorded webinar on our YouTube page. This webinar is brought to you by AAIDD's Religion and Spirituality Interest Network and Stone Belt ARC. Thank you for joining us. And my name is Reverend Sarah McKenney. I'm from Stone Belt, and I will be your tech host today. A few things to note. This, like I said, this webinar will be recorded and will be available in the future on our website. The web address is on your screen along with our Facebook page and our Twitter account. So feel free to check out those sites. I will put these links in the chat here in a few minutes, and I will also send these links as well as the PDF version of all of the slides in this presentation. And I will send those to you all in a follow-up email in the next week or so. Let's see. Zoom. So if you know, a lot of you have been on Zoom over the last several years, but some things I do want to point out is that you are all on mute and your videos will be also turned off during this presentation. You're welcome to use the reactions if those reactions are available to you. You can also ask questions or through the chat function. The chat function is at the bottom of your screen, looks like a little speaking bubble. And you can also use the Q&A box as well to enter in your questions. The chat function can also be used to tell everybody who you are, what you do, where you're from, and use also as a networking tool. So feel free to use that as you see fit. Let that be a tool for you. If you're having trouble with technology, you can email me or give me a call or text. I will put both my email address and my phone number in the chat as well here in a few minutes. And finally, we do have closed captioning turned on. There's a few things that you can do if you want that running closed captioning on the bottom of your screen and you want to keep that off or keep that on, you can do so. If you want it off, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your page and turn and hide is what they call it, hide the subtitles. Another option is that you can show full transcript, and this will give you a running transcript on the side of your screen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator of this discussion today, Miss Joanne Van Sant, or Dr. Reverend Joanne Van Sant. The floor is yours, Joanne.
Great, thanks so much. So good afternoon, everyone. At least it's indeed an afternoon here where I am, and maybe it's afternoon where you are. We have people who call in from all over the world sometimes. So in the northeast coast of the United States, it's a bright and sunny afternoon. So, and then just a reminder about the questions. Using the Q&A will be done at the end of the presentation. So using the Q&A function, the chat function, or the cell number and the email provided to you are the options we have. If it turns out that we're not able to get to all of the questions today because we run out of time, your questions will be answered in some follow-up emails. So we hope to get everything answered during the webinar, but if not, you will be receiving answers to your questions. So now I'm privileged and honored to moderate today's session and to have this moment to briefly introduce our speakers. You will certainly get to know more about them as we go into our presentation, but Melinda Jones Ault is an associate professor of special education at the University of Kentucky. Her experience includes teaching students with moderate and severe disabilities and working on federally funded research related to systemic instruction of students with moderate and severe disabilities. And that was to just highlight a minute of her life experience in this field. Dr. Belva Collins is Professor Emerita at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and her emphasis has been on working with students with extensive support needs. Dr. Collins maintains an active interest in the inclusion of persons with disabilities in their faith communities, and particularly through her own Presbyterian congregation. With both of their careers that have been focused in this research for effective instruction for individuals with extensive support needs and preparing pre-service and in-service special education teachers, they've collaborated on research on inclusion and participation of individuals with disabilities in their faith communities for 20 years at least. So now I'm honored to turn over this presentation to our distinguished guests. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Joanne. We really appreciate being invited to be here. Belva and I, as Joanne said, have worked in this area for a number of years, and so we're really excited to take part in this very important series produced by AAIDD. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at when challenging behaviors might occur with adults that you have in your community of worship or your place of worship, discuss why those challenging behaviors might occur, and then provide you with some strategies that you can take away and use when those kinds of behaviors might occur. So let me share my screen. Okay, you should be seeing my screen now. And we would like to preface our talk today by letting you know that both Belva and I are of the Christian religion, and so that's the framework from which we come and we present our information. But certainly the strategies that we will talk to you about today should be relevant across all religions and varieties of places of worship. So we're excited to be here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Belva to begin.
Okay, it's an honor to be here and to be presenting with Melinda on this topic that means so much to us. And I want to start out by just talking a little bit about inclusion and exclusion in faith communities. And the first question, are we really inclusive of everyone? And I think that we often take down physical barriers or sensory barriers in our worship places. And then we think, oh, we're inclusive. Everybody will come and everybody will participate. But that doesn't mean that we are inclusive always. And what might prevent us from being inclusive? There are a lot of social reasons as well. So let's think about the activities that we have in our faith communities that we want people to participate in and which we'd like to have them be included. And some of those activities obviously begin with the worship service, the kind of worship that we do, but it also extends beyond that. We want to think about different kinds of fellowship activities and educational activities. You may have a book that meets to study scripture, or a book club or a group. You may have a church school where you do educational sessions for people. You may have fellowship where we share meals, we have celebrations, we do volunteer work. There may be recreational opportunities where we look at sports teams or retreats that we go on, or participating in a music program. And then the rites and sacraments of each religion. We think about how do we get people to participate in things like a confirmation or a baptism or a communion or a bar mitzvah. So if we want people to be included and participate in all of those activities in our faith community, there are some reasons that we may include or not include them. And that goes to having expectations for the behaviors of people within each of those activities. We're going to think about the appropriate level of noise, whether people can be on topic in a discussion, if they have a recognition of people's personal space and don't invade that they take turns in discussions, participate, that they respect the property of our faith community and the property of others, and that they use acceptable language in the presence of others. There may be other things you think about as expectations that we have, and I hope we cover most of those today. So if a person is excluded, the obvious reasons that go back to what I just said, it may be because they're making loud noises and it annoys other people or people can't hear. They talk too loud at inappropriate times, they're off topic, they may talk too long, they may show physical aggression toward themselves, toward others, or to the property of our faith community. They may invade other people's personal space, which makes people uncomfortable. And you may think of other reasons people are excluded. But we think about being excluded, there's two types, physical exclusion and social exclusion. And I think the easiest one for us to address is physical exclusion, because when we have physical exclusion, we really do not have a person as part of an activity. We exclude them from it. We ask that maybe they don't participate, or we make it difficult for them to participate, or we try to push them into things that may be segregated just for people with disabilities, or that may not be age appropriate. So those things we usually can think about, brainstorm, and do something about it. But the social exclusion is a little bit more difficult. I think that sometimes people are present in an activity. We think we've included them, but we ignore them. Sometimes we physically separate them, that you do the activity in the other room, we'll do it in this room, or you do it in this part of the room, we'll do it in this part. Sometimes we don't have people take part in the discussions that we're holding because we don't think they can. We don't have them take part in activities because we don't think they have that ability. We sometimes just signal with our body language by turning away from people or not giving them eye contact that we really don't consider them included in whatever it is that we're doing, and that would be social exclusion. So is it ever okay to exclude people? And sometimes we have to say the answer is yes, that sometimes there are reasons that we exclude someone. Sometimes it's because they're a threat to the safety of themselves, to other people. They're having behaviors that are serious. They're hard to ignore. They can't maintain an activity or attend in an activity. And there are all kinds of things that they may do, and especially behaviors that we're talking about today, that we try to ignore and can't, so we end up excluding them. We redirect them to something else. And I think the one thing that I want us to remember throughout this whole talk is that we have to honor people's desire if they want to be excluded from activities. And Dr. Ault is going to talk about communicated intent of behavior. And sometimes when people can't tell us that they don't like to be in part of something, then we just ignore that and try to push them into that. And their behavior may be that they act out in a way that shows they don't want to be part of the activity. So it's going to be really important to match people to the activities that they want to participate in and that they be good at participating in. So once we've excluded someone, do we always exclude them? And the big answer here is no. We may exclude someone temporarily until we brainstorm how to be more inclusive. But if the person wants to be part of our faith community and we want to give them the opportunity to see if they want to be part of that community, then the key to exclusion is this. We look at personal attributes. What can that person bring to our organization or our faith community? And what kinds of things can they do? What talents do they have? What preferences do they have? What's age appropriate for them to be part of? And how can we put the supports and strategies in place for all those activities in our faith community in which they wish to be a part of? So we're going to move on, and I'm going to let Dr. Ault talk a little bit about the communicative intent of behavior.
Thank you, Belva. So I really appreciate you talking about how sometimes behaviors are so severe that we might have to exclude in the moment, but we're always thinking about and planning for how can we support and bring that person back into those particular activities or those particular worship activities that they want to participate in. So I think that we need to think about, why do people behave the way that they do? Why do people have these, what some people call challenging behaviors or problem behaviors? And I know that during the first webinar in this series, there was some discussion about this. And so we have to think about that people communicate in different ways, and not everybody uses conventional forms of communication. So conventional forms of communication that most people use is oral speech, and they're able to use their speech and communicate and get their wants answered, their comments, they can get information they need, they can ask questions. But that doesn't always work for everybody, because some people either haven't learned how to do that or don't have the capability at the time to do that. And so as a result, we can see that challenging behaviors occur. But the reason they occur is because individuals don't have another way, or a more traditional or conventional way to communicate. And so they can use what some people call idiosyncratic behaviors to communicate. So example might be that if someone is making really, really loud noises, in an environment where nobody else is making really loud noises, what they might be communicating is, I'm overstimulated and I don't want to be here anymore, and I need to get out because all this noise is really bothering me. Or you might see somebody who's, pushing and shoving, and what that might be communicating is, I really want to get that seat up front. And so I'm going to push and get that seat up front because I want to be there before everybody else is there. You can also get individuals who maybe they're talking really loudly and they're talking a lot. And what they might be communicating is, I really like attention, and I really like it when you talk to me, and I really like when you interact with me. And so I'm talking a lot because I'm trying to get you to pay attention to me. And then there's another category where a person might be doing a behavior because they like the sensory input that it provides for them. So they might be doing a humming noise, and the reason they're doing that is not necessarily to communicate anything, but just to, the reason they're doing it is because they like that sensory stimulation, and that gives them, that perhaps it helps to ease some anxiety, or there's some kind of sensory feedback they're getting from it. So we have to think about idiosyncratic ways that people communicate. But in all instances, when you are interacting with an individual who has a challenging behavior, you always want to remain calm, try to de-escalate that behavior, and really think about, what is the purpose of this person's communication? What is their communicative intent? What is the reason they're doing that? What is the function of that communication? So we can use this graphic to think about this SEAT acronym, which puts categories puts behavior into 4 categories of behavior of why people do these challenging behaviors. The first one is sensory, that I talked to you about. And the reason the person is doing the behavior is because it's providing some kind of sensory experience for them that is making them feel good, or is making them feel better. It really doesn't have a communication purpose. They're not really trying to communicate that to anybody else, but they're doing it because they like that input that they're getting. Another reason that people do challenging behaviors is that they're trying to escape from something. And they don't have a more conventional way to do it. So what they might do is, start making really loud noises or start cursing. And what they're trying to communicate is, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And they can do that if it's task is too long, if it's something's really difficult, if it's something that they don't prefer, if they're ready to move on and do something else. And so what we might think about then is, can we teach them another way, a more conventional way, a more acceptable way to say, I want to be out of here, so that they can get their communication honored and they can be able to escape that situation. Another category is attention. So some people really, really like social interaction. And unfortunately, sometimes they are okay if the social interaction is maybe kind of negative, or if the social interaction is positive. But they may really like that social interaction, and they're trying to get access to people paying attention to them. And so what we can do is think about, what are some more conventional ways or better ways for you to get that attention? Can you tap somebody on the shoulder? Can you raise your hand in a religious education class? Can you go up and introduce yourself to someone? And so teaching them those more appropriate ways to get attention is where we would want to go there. In addition to giving that person lots of attention when they are not doing that challenging behavior. So they're getting lots of attention during times when the challenging behavior is not occurring. And then we can think about tangibles. So people engage in challenging behaviors when they want something. Maybe they want an activity, or they want to get a hold of an object, or there's something that they want to get some information. So there's something that they're trying to access. And so what we can do is we can teach them a more conventional way. We can maybe redirect. Let's say somebody is really pushing to get that front seat, and we can stop, we can redirect, we can prompt them, we can give them a strategy to use to, okay, let's take it slow. We're going to go down. You're still going to get your seat, but we're going to take it slow. And we can prompt individuals on how to do that in a more acceptable way. So if we remember this acronym SEAT and think about, what is the function of the behavior? Why is that person doing that behavior? What that helps us with is, it leads us then to, okay, what strategy or intervention would I select for that person? So that's why it's so important to know, why is that person doing that? If we decide the person is humming and making a noise because of the sensory input they're getting, then the intervention we might choose is, okay, let's give them another way to get that same sensory input. Maybe give them earbuds and play music and see if that still gives them that same sensory input. So the function of the behavior is directly related to what strategy or intervention we would select for that person. All right. So Belva and I are going to frame our work in terms of this inverted triangle for thinking about positive behavior supports, and how can we positively support people within their faith communities. And it's often represented in this inverted triangle, where 80% of the individuals who are in the fattest part of the triangle, in this green area, are able to maintain, appropriate behaviors with universal interventions, things that are in place for everybody. And when these good things are in place for everybody, 80% of the people will be able to do just fine. Everything will go great. But then there's an additional 15% represented by the middle part of this triangle that's yellow, that they just still are having some problems with these universal interventions, and they might need a little bit more support. Maybe something that you would do for a small group of people, or something that would be designed for these individuals who are not being able to be successful with these universal interventions. And then finally, we have about 5% of the people who will need intensive individual intervention. So these are people who the first level wasn't effective, the second level wasn't effective. And so we're going to be very intentional about designing specific interventions that are pretty intensive just for them to address a particular challenging behavior. So what Belva and I are going to do is talk through each one of these levels and provide you with some strategies at each level that you might use. Belva, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about tier 1.
All right, so I'm going to talk about those supports that we should have in place for everyone. And you might think about, if you're working with the faith community, on how do I put this in place in our church? You might take it to whoever the leaders are in your faith community and say, here are things we really need to have in place or to make people more aware of. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is just giving praise. And, you know, it's really something that we do naturally, but sometimes we don't do it often enough. So we want to make sure that we have plenty of praise in place for people. This is really just catching people doing behaviors that we want them to do. We can let them know verbally by saying, great job, I like the way you did that. We can do it with something written, like a little note that says, you've done a great job today. We can give gestures like a thumbs up, or we can just give our smiles and let people have that visual feedback from us that they're doing a great job, or a pat on the back. But this will work mostly for people who really need a lot of attention and their behavior indicates that, so we give them the praise. Along with praise, we want to think about giving people some kind of corrective feedback when they don't act in the way that they need to act in a certain situation. And so when we give corrective feedback, we usually do that in a very positive way. Again, it can be written or gestural, or it can be the lack of a smile that we're not giving to them. But we want this to be educational, that our feedback in some way lets them know how they should behave because they weren't behaving that way at this instance. So an example that I jotted down here, you might look at someone who's being really loud, who's maybe singing or, you know, being inappropriate for the quiet context of something. And we would say, oh, you have such a lovely voice. And I love that you can use that during choral readings, or that you can use it during our singing in our choir. But sometimes there are quiet activities where we really need you to use your thoughts instead of your words. Just a moment, get a drink. I'm sorry. So in that case, the person learns that, oh yeah, I can participate with my voice, but I do it at appropriate times, and sometimes I need not to be so loud. And then we want to model for people, give them that corrective feedback and let them watch us doing something correctly. It might be, you know, how we follow along, something that's in print, and we show them that we're following along so that they can do that too. And the next one that we have available to everybody is that you can engage in preferred activities. I like to think about when you finish a class and you've been working really hard on something, or you've done an activity that's kind of demanding, that you usually have some kind of fellowship afterwards, that you have, you know, lemonade or coffee, and you have a time to kind of sit back and think about what you've done and enjoy the time together. And the same thing when we look at all kinds of activities in our church. We can think about during a worship service, if someone's been really quiet, then they have an opportunity to be noisy. It might be that someone can go play some music that they couldn't do during the service. Or it might be that after they've been quiet and have had a discussion on something, they get to go make a bulletin board about it using the art activities in the craft room that will go into the hallway. So if there are people who really want tangible activities and their behaviors showing us that, then this is a good way to do that, to think about what's a preferred activity that I can let them engage in once they finish something that was a little more difficult. Another example from tier 1 is to have interactions with faith members. And I think all of us enjoy this, those times that we come together just to fellowship. It may be a meal. It may be that we're celebrating some rite or sacrament. And we all come together and we're going to support each other. And here we might think about having someone be a mentor to that person or a friend. someone who just sits by them, who's with them during a meal, who's with them during a special activity. And that person can be matched to the person's interest and kind of be a role model for them, and a person that kind of guides them through the activity in an appropriate way. Another is that we offer individual assistance. And I think most of our faith communities, when we have a service, have someone there to greet people or to usher them in or to show them where to go or what to do. During the service, we often have leaders during the service that guide us through music or guide us through the offertory or guide us through any of the sacraments that we're doing. And so what we want to do is make sure that we have someone who is trained that can assist someone who needs some assistance, who can tell them where to sit, tell them where to enter, tell them what room to go to, who during a service can tell them when to sit or when to kneel or when to stand, what to do during an offertory, that you put money in, you don't take money out, what to do during communion, that you do it in this manner for this type of faith. And we want to involve people in getting the assistance and giving the assistance we can. And also think about a person with a disability. Once they've learned how to do an activity themselves, they often can be a really good assistant for other people. And another one I think is quite common for all of our denominations and all of our faith communities is that we have a really publicized schedule of activities. And it's a menu that people can pick and choose the things that they would prefer the most. And we get people into a habit of preferring something and going to it, probably going to have less behavioral issues than they're pushed into something they don't want to attend. So having that menu of activities or menu of classes for people is really important. Just giving an opportunity to select. And I keep losing my voice, I'm very sorry. But sometimes people don't even know what's available or what they want to be part of. And what you might think about is letting people sample it. So a friend invites them to go to a music program, and then we see if they like it, or to a worship service and see if their behavior indicates they like that, or to a book reading or an art class or a weekend retreat. And if we let people sample activities and we see that they're enjoying them, then we know we've made the right selection for that person, and we can further encourage them to be part of that activity. Then we want to think about, once we're in activities, how do we embed choice in those activities? A couple of questions we can ask. Would you like to sing or to listen? Would you like to be in an active service or in a more quiet service? Would you prefer to write with your pencil or write on a keyboard? Would you like to sit in the front of this activity or in the back? Would you like to attend a service that happens in the morning or in the evening? And if we can build in these choices, probably the behavior is going to be better. I know that in the church I now attend, we have 2 services. And one service is more active and moving. The other service is more traditional and quiet. And we could let the person sample each of those and see which one they prefer and which one fits them the best. Then I want to move from these 80% of tier 1 supports to go into the 15% of tier 2 supports. And these are supports that we can make available to a group of people. They're not individually designed, but they are there to give a little extra support when someone needs a little bit of extra support. So we'll go through some of these. One is that we might have a program that gives help, a mentoring program, a peer buddy program, someone who can sit in the pew with someone during a worship service, or just someone who volunteers to be a friend to someone else. So we want to think about the likes and interests when we match people. We want to think of the talents and abilities. And if those profiles match, they enjoy the same kinds of activities, they like to go to the same types of services, then we match them together to be a support. This person may offer transportation. They may just offer help during transitions, like going from a worship service into a fellowship activity or into an educational class. They may make periodic visits or phone calls to the person. So just someone to be a friend. Another tier support is for someone who really is a little fidgety. And I know that my family, when we all sit in the same pew, we wiggle a lot. And we sometimes get that pew wiggling just a little bit with us. And it's, might be some reason that we are trying to keep our attention better, but it's just something that we get a little fidgety after we've been sitting for a while. And we need to recognize that we can help some people with this. And there are objects that you can buy, like a little spinner that you can hold in your hand, a bracelet you can put on with beads that you can manipulate, something on an ink pen that we can click or unclick. We just need to be careful that we don't have something that will annoy others sitting around us. So that comes into consideration too. But something that you can quietly do. And a really good example is just a doodle pad, that you have paper and pencil and you can doodle something when you feel like you need to have some kind of movement to help with that anxiety that you have. Another tier to support is to think about age appropriate and adaptive materials. And this we can be either low tech or high tech. And low tech devices are those materials that are readily available in our congregation that we don't have to do too much to get them ready for someone to adapt them. So think about having an order of service, and then we just highlight parts where you need to stand up. Or think about, or where you could take a break. Think about taking a pencil and just putting a little tape around it to make it a little larger in diameter so it better fits your hand. And then you're not so aggravated trying to write something. So these are things that are pretty easy for us to do if we just look and pay attention to what that person's needs are. The more high-tech devices are probably something that's going to need to be purchased. And a lot of times individuals will come to our faith community already having the devices. If not, we can think about, can we offer those? So examples that they're probably going to have would be the person that wears glasses for vision, a person that has a hearing aid for hearing support, a person that uses a wheelchair to get from one place to another. Other things we might put in place might be to have some auditory device in our congregation that someone can pick up if they feel like they need it. Or we can have bulletins with enlarged print so someone can follow along a little easier. Or we can have iPads that have a picture schedule. We might use a smart board that we can program in an educational class. But these are things that we'll probably want to think about purchasing and a little bit more thought if the person doesn't already have their individual material. And then really easy to follow up on that is to think about how we have a clear structure to our services and activities that a person can follow along with, whether it's on an iPad or on some kind of printed material. And it may be large print, as I said, it may be highlighted, but we're going to have this be a predictable order, because sometimes we find out when people know what's coming next, their behavior's better. So if they can see, oh, I'm getting a break coming up where I get to stand, they might be able to sit for just a little bit longer. Or if they know I'm getting some music that I get to sing, they might be able to be quiet for just a little bit longer, just knowing that predictability of the schedule. And as we're talking about the predictability of schedule, we want to think about, when does movement occur? And how can we have movement within our Tier 2 support? So at any activity, think about a service when we're going to be singing. Maybe we can stand and we can clap and we can tap our feet a little bit during that. We want to have that movement built in. And if you're planning about having some kind of long activity where people have to listen and concentrate, think also about having points that we stop and we just have a little movement. Also teach the person that they can sit, near a door, so if they need to get up, stretch their legs, or walk outside and then back in, they can have that movement that they can advocate for themselves without the whole group doing it. Which comes to having clear break times. And we want to make sure that we never make an activity go on for too long, that's too quiet and too meditative, but we have breaks built into it so that the sessions are never long. And this way, a person who doesn't know how to communicate the need that they need a break or how to take it themselves has it built into their schedule and their activity already. Along with that, I'll talk about seating, and we talked about personal space being something that a person with inappropriate behavior may not know to stay out of someone else's space, and we can help them learn that by just spacing out the seating a little bit. So if we're doing a circle group for an educational class, we can spread the seats out so that they can make big motions with their arms or move their feet back and forth without bothering the person next to them. When during our congregation, we can try to have wider seats and direct people toward places that would be more appropriate to them, whether it's the back of the room or the side of the room, that there's comfortable seating. And then we have a place that maybe people can escape to. I know that in the church I used to attend, and I think the one I have now, also they have a separate room where they have a monitor set up for the service. So anyone that needs to leave service because they need a break or they need to make noise, like I've been coughing a little bit today, I might remove myself so I can cough and not annoy other people. We can have a room that's separate where they can go and they can still participate because they can be part of the music, part of the lesson that's going on. They can hear things, they can see things, and just be a way to do that for a little while as long as they need it, and then return to the activity itself. And then I'm going to turn it over to Melinda to talk about those people who need the most support.
Thank you, Belva. So now we're going to move into tier 3 supports. And tier 3 supports are going to be individually designed for people who are having a particular challenging behavior that's happening. So those are going to be designed for that learner, their specific characteristics, their specific behavior that's occurring, and also perhaps for a specific setting, like are these behaviors happening in youth group, during the potluck, during Hebrew school, during religious education class, during the worship service. So you're very specifically drilling down to what is the behavior that's occurring and where is it occurring. So unlike the tier 1 and the tier 2 interventions, the tier 1 interventions are designed for everybody, universal, they're in place. And when those things are in place, we all are doing pretty well and we're functioning pretty well. Tier 2 interventions are things that we're going to add in for those people who are, I'm just still not doing so well if I just have tier 1 interventions, but if I have these additional things that are maybe for that are put in place for a group of people, I can do pretty well. But tier 3 interventions are going to be for people who all of those wonderful things that you have in place is still not working really well for them. So I would encourage you to get a committee of people that would be in charge of working with that individual to develop a strategy or an intervention for them. And I would ask you to take advantage of your congregants and the skills that they bring to serve on such a committee. And the committee will help to identify and really specifically define what the challenging behavior is, look at what function of behavior is occurring, design an intervention, and then evaluate the effectiveness of it. And if it's not working, it's not being effective, then we're going to come back to the drawing board and we're going to work again, all again with that idea of always supporting people, always trying to get people back included into their community as much as possible. But you can look at, do you have in your congregation, do you have teachers? Do you have special educators? Do you have behavior analysts? Do you have social workers? Do you have related service individuals like speech language pathologists and occupational therapists? All of those people do this, in their job. And so they would be very helpful in terms of developing individual interventions. So what I'm going to do is provide some examples of interventions that obviously you're not going to do all of these things for an individual, but you're going to match that individual with the best intervention that you think at the time and measure how well it's happening, how well it's working. So we're just going to give you a sample of some interventions that are often used and are evidence-based to be used with people with challenging behaviors. The first one is the use of visual supports. So many times, individuals with disabilities, including individuals with autism, do really well when they have a visual support. In other words, something to look at that makes whatever is happening be a bit more concrete for them and supports them in whatever they're trying to do. The examples on the screen are all examples that are using technology, but certainly it doesn't have to be technology. It can be something that Belva was referring to as low tech, just something on a piece of paper. But things like visual schedules, having a representation of this is the order that things are going to happen today. And it can be accompanied with a picture or a graphic, or it could just be words if the person is able to do well with words. And maybe they can check off as things happen. And having that schedule and knowing what's going to happen is really effective for many people. Thinking about a visual timer. The one in the middle is one that just came from, the smartphone, but that's a visual timer where the little orange circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and helps people see, oh, I've only got that much more until the orange goes away. And then perhaps I can escape the activity if that was if that is their challenge, is they don't like to sit for very long. And so that is a nice intervention to use with those individuals. But it can be something that they just, write on their notes app. It doesn't have to be as high tech as this is. Many people have really good luck with a first then graphic, and you can make it more age appropriate for adults. But really what it is a visual representation of, first we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. So you review that with the person before they're in the activity. And then maybe during the activity, you say, okay, remember, first we're going to have our prayer session, and then we're going to go and eat lunch, so that it makes it more concrete for the person to know what is coming up for their activity. Always have a way and an alternative mode of communication for individuals if they need it. So as we talked about, problem behaviors can occur because the individual really doesn't have a more conventional way to communicate what they want or what their issue is. And so these are just examples of a communication board where you can use photos, you can use graphics if the individual does not have an alternative way, mode of communication. Often if they do, they'll bring it with them. There are high-tech options, but you can make these very low-tech options and communicate with the person. You use it to communicate with them, and they can use it to communicate with you, and you can make it for very, very specific activities that might occur in your community. But you're going to teach them and provide them an alternative way to communicate, individualized for them and individualized for their functioning level, that's going to hopefully prevent and decrease some of these challenging behaviors that they might have used other ways of communicating in the past. Oh, I like to talk about these social narratives. So social narratives are, some people call them social stories. Social story is a very specific form of a social narrative. But what it is it's a story about something that individual is going to participate in. And it cues that listener to attend to very specific details within a routine, gets them ready or primes them for what's going to be happening during that routine. It shows them the expectations. It prepares them to be able to navigate that activity better. Let me show you the example that I adapted, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So here's an example where this is one about going to a wedding ceremony. Today we are going to a wedding. It is an event in which two individuals who love each other agree to spend the rest of their lives together in front of their friends and family. At weddings, we listen to the person marrying the bride and groom. Some weddings are held in churches. Some weddings are held at other places. Now, here's where it starts to come in with, what are the behavioral expectations that might happen in that place? During church, I must sit quietly while the ceremony is going on. If I'm having a difficult time at the wedding, I will quietly get up out of my seat and go to the back where the ceremony is taking place so I can compose myself. So it helps them know, what can I do to replace that challenging behavior that might come up? And then it always gives a perspective on how other people might think of you. It's very great honor to be invited to someone's wedding. It means that I'm a special person in their life. So if you were going to use a social story with an individual, you could read it with them. They can read it by themselves, but you would review it before you go to the activity to let them see what are the expectations of coming up. Then they participate in the activity and you can remind them about it while the activity is going on, or bring the social story with you. And then after the activity, review again. Oh, you did a great job. You sat quietly. We saw the people get married, and they must really think a lot of you because they invited you to this wedding. So those are called social narratives. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You know, this isn't fancy. This is just some people wrote some words and took some pictures. And so then you can individualize it for your activity and individualize it for your particular individual. And it doesn't have to be professionally produced by any means, just so that it gets a point across to them. Excuse me, I'm jumping. Okay, another important thing to do to help people, sometimes all people need is to have a role play and a rehearsal. So they really get upset or challenged when they don't know what's going to happen, or they've never done that before, or they need to be reminded what's going to happen and what they're supposed to do. So you can pull a person and go over, let's role play what's going to happen, or let's rehearse what you're going to do and what you should do and what's going to happen. If you can take the person into the actual setting where the event is going to be taking place, all the better. But the way that you do this to a person with a person is that you role play what's going to happen, rehearse before they participate, and then after they are in the activity, you can remind them, okay, remember when we, practiced this? So we're going to do that just like we practiced, and then talk to them on the end of the activity and really give a lot of praise and encouragement for them participating appropriately or using an alternative way of communicating. Okay. Let me give an example of this role play. So I had an individual who went to my place of worship, and people were telling me that in the religious education class, he was dominating the conversation. And it was a group set up of adults who were, they would read a book or they would read something in their materials, and then they would communicate about it and discuss about it at the end. Well, he was dominating the conversation. So what we might do with that person is say, okay, let's role play. And so I'm going to pretend like I'm the person leading the class and we've read this chapter, and I'm going to open it up for discussion. So let's role play what you might do. And then we could tell him, okay, how about when you start talking, you press the stopwatch on your phone, and when you get to 1 minute, you're going to stop, and then you're going to conclude your comments and let somebody else have a turn. So it's just a matter of practicing role play and rehearsal before they get in the situation. All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about video modeling. Video modeling is an evidence-based strategy, and it is when you show an individual a video of appropriate behaviors, what you're supposed to do. You don't show them a video of them doing the inappropriate behavior. You show a video of them doing the appropriate behavior right before they participate in that activity. And then they go and participate in that activity. And video models have been shown to be very effective in decreasing challenging behaviors. So I'm going to show you a very small snippet. This is one where it's two young men, it's not adults, but and again, it's going to be very individualized for what that person's challenge is. So in this particular example, you're going to hear them talk about, well, how do we, initiate a conversation with other people, and how do we say goodbye? And so I'm going to show a very short snippet of this.
In this video, you will learn how to start, continue, and end a conversation. Let's take a look at an example.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. What did you do this weekend?
I went to the movies. What did you do?
Oh, I ate pizza.
Nice. Gosh, I have to go now. It was nice to meet you.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Notice how Jonah said hi at the beginning of the conversation. You should always start a conversation with some type of greeting. Also notice how Jonah and Nikhil were making eye contact with each other. It is very important to ask questions to your peer to show that you are interested in what they said. Also, do not interrupt them while they are talking. It wouldn't be nice to just walk away or say bye without warning. And just like when you say hi, when your peer says hi to you, you should also say bye when your peer says bye to you.
So as you can see, it doesn't have to be professionally produced. These were some young men who just did this on their own. You can get your smartphone and take a video of two people or other people interacting and doing that particular activity or participating in that event using appropriate behaviors. You can use actors that you are volunteer, but you can also use the individual themselves for a self model. So if you prompt them and tell them what to do and take a video of them, then they can watch themselves doing that event or participating in that activity using appropriate behavior. So that's called a video model. Okay, now we can help people to self-manage their behavior too. And you want to think about how can I help this person self-manage themselves? How can I help them be able to participate in activities without somebody else being involved, but I can monitor myself? You probably monitor your own behavior too when you're in certain situations. Maybe somebody does something and you want to yell at them, but you don't. You keep that under wraps because that's not an appropriate thing to do at the time. So there are some apps that you can use, but again, it doesn't have to be technology. But let me give you some examples of self-management apps. One on the right here is it's called a motivator. The exact same thing you could use on your smartwatch if you have it, where it will buzz you so it doesn't disturb other people, but it'll vibrate on a certain interval. So you can do it after a certain number of seconds, or you can do it after a certain number of minutes. It'll vibrate. And then when it vibrates, the person can say to themselves, because you've taught them to do this, oh, let's say it's a person who has a tendency to be really loud in a service where they shouldn't be really loud. And so it vibrates and they say to themselves, am I being quiet? Do I have a quiet, low voice? And then they're going to say yes. Maybe they can check mark or move one penny from one pocket to another pocket so that they can monitor how they're doing. And that would be a way to self-manage whatever their particular issue is. Then the one on the right is a ChoiceWorks app. It's a little bit more elementary, but you can change some of the pictures to make it more age appropriate for adults. But the ChoiceWorks app just has lots of the elements we were talking about in terms of visual supports. And so it can have a way to set up a visual schedule, a visual timer, a first then kind of a board too. All right, a contingency map. You don't want to use this with everybody, but it might be really appropriate for an individual that you have. A contingency map is a strategy that assists a person in seeing, okay, I can do these kind of behaviors, or I can do these kind of behaviors. And then what is the consequence going to be, depending upon which behavior I engage in? So you can think about it, you know, we want to take the high road in terms of the green. So let's think about this one is words. Doesn't have to be words. If a person functions better with photos, functions better with pictures. You could even put this into a video format if the person does better with that. But the box on the left is where you think about, okay, what is the triggering element that happens for this person that often leads to a challenging behavior? So let's say there's a particular song that comes on during worship, and it comes on every week, and this person hates this song. And usually challenging behaviors occur because they don't want that song. They want access to a tangible. They want a different song. And so you talk through this talk through this map with the person, and you model how to use it. And so you show them, okay, if the music comes on that you don't like, what is one thing you can do? Well, you can listen quietly. You can look at your timer until the song is over. And then if you do those things, you can go and visit Sam in the foyer, and you love to go to visit Sam. It's a very reinforcing activity for this person. Or when that song comes on, you can talk really loudly about the song. You might say curse words about the song, but the consequence is going to be you don't get to go visit Sam. So we model for the person. We practice using it in a role play situation. We take it with us into the actual situation. And then when the person is successful using it, then we start to fade it out over time. Finally, I have for you, skipping again, behavioral contract. Behavioral contract is something you might think of just like a contract you sign, but it's going to be about helping that individual set goals for their behavior. And you get with the individual and you sit down, and it's very individualized. You work together and you define very specifically what is the behavior that person is engaging in that is causing problems. And then you establish a set of criteria or a goal that they need to meet about that challenging behavior. And then talk together about what is the reward that you want to receive if you meet the goals that we've set forth in this contract. And then all parties sign it. The individual signs it, you sign it, and they are signing that they're going to work to meet these goals. And you are signing saying that if they meet the criteria that you set, then you will help them access that particular reward. And that is called a behavioral contract. So those are the tier 1 through 3 supports that we have for you today. And we have an opportunity, hopefully, to take some questions or for you all to provide any comments that you might have. I'm going to stop share.
Okay, we have a abundance of information and thoughts, I'm sure, running through our heads. So I do want to invite anyone for questions. We did have one question from Sarah about what are some of the visual schedule apps that you referred to? What would be some of those?
Yeah, so that ChoiceWorks app is a good one. I think I have it was $14.99, so it's a little, and that one you could put on a tablet or you can put on a phone, but that one's called ChoiceWorks app, and it has a visual schedule in it. There are many that are available. And if you want a low-tech option, you can just make one, take a picture of the sequence of events that things are going to happen. And you can even just have it in a format the person could carry.
Okay. Another question was, will we have access to the slides? It would be helpful to share with church leaders.
Yes. Sarah, were you want to respond to that?
I can respond to that. So all slides will be sent to everyone in a follow-up email as like a PDF file.
All right, I have a question from Amy. How do you see relationship covenants in congregations in setting the shared expectation for tier 1 behavior of everyone in a community? Do you have some examples of effective covenants? Did you get all that? It was a long question.
Well, I'm not sure about covenant. I'm going to respond to this. What we did in the church I had where I was part of a group called Open Arms. We did this for 10 years. Each year we had an Access Sunday to increase congregation awareness. And so we would invite a speaker for the weekend. We'd make sure every educational class centered around disability awareness. One year we tackled hearing impairments, one year behavior, one year vision, motor disabilities. We tried to vary it by having examples of people come in and talk to the children all the way through the adults to get the congregation on board, because everybody thought they were being inclusive. And our church, what we found is they were going to start a class for people with disabilities of all ages where they would go to a preschool class. And I was just appalled. And, it was just because there was no awareness. And so once we got people buying into age-appropriate activities and being more inclusive, I think that helped the congregation, and we were able to do that. So it just was getting that buy-in from everyone. And I guess that's a covenant of a kind, because we're agreeing that as a congregation we'll do this.
And I'll mention one thing in that you all are familiar with Eric Carter's work, and I heard him speak one time about in terms of forming relationships with people who need support in their place of worship. And we kind of come at it as who wants to volunteer, who wants to be on this committee, who wants to support people with disabilities. And he said, I realized I was asking the wrong questions. The questions should have been who likes to golf, who likes to go fishing, who likes to watch, UK basketball. And so when you match the people together in terms of what they really love to, who loves to study the Bible, when you match those people up, then you can match a much more natural support and form better relationships.
Our next question is from Sue. In the chat, how have you helped Pew Buddies / friends establish boundaries to establish a sustainable relationship?
Good question. Do you want to respond, Melinda, first?
Yeah, we had a program where the same individual that I was talking about earlier that tended to dominate the conversation, and he tended also to dominate relationships. I guess he would get really attached to people. And so we had a group of people who would agree to help to support him. And then we would kind of rotate every week. So it was a very small group. And so we still had good relationships with him, but it was a very small group of people that would work with him when he came to activities which he needed to have some support.
Yeah. And we had a gentleman with a vision impairment who we later discovered probably had some behavioral needs as well. And our deacons took that on so that it wouldn't be too much on one person. We want you to have one-on-one relationships, but it can really fatigue someone too much to do that all the time. And we found out that across about 20 people, we could share the transportation, we could share the transitions and activities in the church. We could share all these responsibilities and it not just be attached to one person all the time.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat or in our Q&A. Sarah put in, if you have further questions after today, you can send them to her at her email address, which is in the chat. And I guess I can turn it back over to Sarah for looking out for the next time.
Yeah, that's it. So I just wanted to again bring up our future schedule, make sure all of the rest of this series is available to you to register. So we have 2 more webinars in this series. So go please check it out, get registered, and you can expect a follow-up email from me in the next week or 2 with these slides and some helpful links for you all. Thank you. And thank you for joining us.